Hello, I'm Lisa Burkhardt Worley of Pearls of Promise Ministries, along with Dr. Lynnette Simm, and you're listening to Pop Talk, the show where you never know what subjects might pop up. How safe do you feel your personal data is when using your computer? What about your phone? Could people actually be watching what you do through your phone? Well, today our topic is cybersecurity, and we've invited an expert in the field to hopefully answer some of those questions. Dr. Lynnette Simm will introduce him, and as you will find out, she's known our guest for a long time.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I'm very excited. Today, our guest is Rob Gresham. Rob has over 15 years experience in building and providing cybersecurity teams while providing incident response, security, architect, forensic, and threat intelligence to both public and private entities in support of civil and criminal investigations. Whew. His experience includes several years of instructing on cyber threat intelligence, incident response, and overall security operations processes, architects, and design. He currently works as a global security architect at Splunk, specializing in security orchestration, automation, and response. He has also worked at McAfee, Intel, Dell, EMC, Remax International, and has spent several years consulting in the United States Air Force, Army, and Navy in their cybersecurity. He has retired in 2016 with 26 years of service in the United States Army and National Guard. And he went from a recruit to all the way to Lieutenant Colonel, receiving a Bronze Star and Meritorious Service Medal while participating in 3 wartime campaigns in Southwest Asia. On a personal note, I would like to introduce you to my big brother, Rob Gresham. It is so great to have you here on Pop Talk, Rob. Now you get to see a little what I do in my spare time. But and we could talk forever on cybersecurity. I was just visiting you, and just to hear all that you do, and like I was mentioning earlier, to see your calendar and all the meetings that you have, and just to listen from the living room when you were having one of your meetings, it's amazing. So, but let's start with something as easy as what we can never leave home without, which is our cell phones. Now, according to an article from the American Bar Association magazine, depending upon the number of apps that you have installed, your cell phone can send data regarding your location thousands of times. So this means wherever you go, you're being tracked. Big brother, are we being tracked?
Would you like me to show you where you are physically in your house right now?
You and I definitely know because we track each other, but you tell us about the other big brother.
Yeah, so the other big brother doesn't really get your identity information or your location information unless you choose to share it, right? It was kind of, Lisa, to let you in on like a little family joke, we have location services turned on and everybody shares. So before COVID, I would travel frequently and I would get a call or a random text like, oh, so how's Germany today? Simply because she would know that I was in Germany because she could see my location information. While different products and different tools definitely have a capability to track your information, the question is really what are you sharing and how are you sharing that information? The other side of it plays on which tools have what level of access to your system and how that access is derived. So one of the big things that I try to split away from is what kind of security are you looking for? Are you on the scale of super scared and can't move and are completely paranoid that everybody's watching you all the time and Big Brother's looking over your shoulder? Is that possible? Yep. So if you're a criminal, good luck for you. Because if you're using a cell phone, chances are you can be spied upon. If we know your number, we can find you, you get your code, then it's all about triangulating your location across cell towers, and we know exactly where you are at all times. So many criminals have been caught by their phones. Once their phones have been seized, they can go back and look at the back of the records and see where you've been. And that's all information that law enforcement can gather on you because of where your phone has been, what towers it's been to. Now, all the stuff that's inside your phone with respects to location data and where you are, you share that information. So it's not these apps are giving it away. you're turning on permission for that app to use location. And with that, guess what it does? It sends back where you are. Hey, you're visiting Walmart today. Well, let me show you some ads from Walmart, that kind of stuff. So when we look at the two major types of phones out there, one being an Apple derivative and the other one being a Google derivative, the Apple derivative is more locked down and really starting to make some people angry, talking about bigger businesses that use their data, because they're going to start locking down and opting in versus opting out scenario. We can talk about that a little bit more. But they're going to force an opt-in scenario for your privacy, your location data, opposed to what it is now, like Google and others, where you opt out. You say, well, I don't want to share, but by default, it's sharing everything that it has. When it comes to security of those two phones, the biggest thing that I would want to talk about the two differences in between some phones and others is the operating system that it uses and where you get that operating information, right? So Apple is a centrally managed operating system and one store that you get all your apps from. So there's a good level of control there to make sure that you get only the apps that you need. But again, to some people's chagrin or pleasure, that control can also immediately cause you problems later down the road if there's a particular app that you want that they don't support. Well, you can download those apps, but the problem with downloading those apps is you open yourself up for other things like rootkits and jailbreaking your phone and other things that make you even more vulnerable. And they could be leaving or taking all your data out because all the controls in that particular product are being taken away from you. The difference between that and the Android variant or the Google variant is that the Android variant, Google ships a product for manufacturers to use called Android. They use that and they build their own based on that. So from those two variances, everybody can add what special sauce they want, like Samsung and whatnot, can add their special sauce of code that they want in there. So now in order for you to patch or get updates, you have to wait for not only Google to figure it out, fix it, and then send it to Samsung to test their code, figure it out, and give it back to you. So it makes it a little bit complicated when it comes to how fast you can fix a vulnerability that may be occurring that'll cause an issue, or removing an app from the store, where Apple's a little bit more immediate. They find something, they just remove it, game's over. Also, Google has they have their own Play Store, but other organizations can stand up their own Play Stores. So even just because Google and Apple say no on an Android phone, that's okay. Samsung can have their own store and host it there, for example. There is one product out there that's more like Apple from Google, and that would be the Google Pixel, which is a Google-only phone that you can buy from them. It has the same functionality of the Android operating system, but it's sold directly from Google. The key here is flexibility. Your availability, your flexibility, your opt-in of data sharing actually creates the risk or the experience that you want to have as a user. So that's really it's sharing that data is where the fun comes in. And generally, that's where you want to kind of align those things together.
I've got way too many apps on my phone. I'm just going to tell you, like, several pages of them. So I need to go in there and get rid of the ones that I don't want anymore. So before I get to laptops, Rob, so I've been told that actually people can look at you through your camera, phone lens, like there's something called a periscope that can come up and see what all's going on. Is that true? Or is that just, no? Okay, good.
There's not a periscope, but if somebody put an app on your phone that gave them access to the camera, like this Zoom app, for example,
okay,
and they had the ability to activate the camera without your permission, they can. Apple created a really cool feature on theirs that when the camera is operating, you can actually see an icon on your phone in the top right-hand corner, right where the bars are for the Wi-Fi. There's a little orange or green icon to let you know that the camera is running or not. And that'll be helpful for you to know when that's going on.
Well, that's good to know. So I'll be looking for that. Our laptops are also pretty scary. And I've been hacked before, and it's no fun. I've actually had somebody send me a message saying, we're watching you and we see what you're looking at and you need to pay us X amount. And it's like, I haven't been looking at anything bad. What, you know, like YouTube videos, worship videos. I mean, I'm not doing anything, but I think they do that because they're phishing and they're trying to find the person that is. And then I've been receiving these pop-ups that say, don't Google anything because people are tracking you through Google. Anyway, Reader's Digest had an article out about all this, and it said that in 2014, the FBI ran its largest cyber operation to date, in which scores of webcam hackers in more than 12 countries were arrested. Now, that's a lot of countries with a lot of hackers. How easy, though, is it to be hacked on your computer?
If there's a will, there's a way. So the scary part is if you're using a Windows operating system, it's a lot harder than it has been, right? It used to be super easy, but Microsoft has done a really good job in the last 5 to 10 years with Windows 10 to make it a whole lot easier. The best way I can explain this is that you have no police in the internet. The internet is a territory on its own, right? It's cyberspace, is for lack of a better way to glorify it. But there's no police in cyberspace. You can move freely, go wherever you want, do whatever you want, hang out with all the people you want. There's nobody there that's going to police you in where you go and what you do. And there's the whole thing about dark web, right? And really all that is there's connections, right? Places to go where they've anonymize the content and anonymize the processes that you can get to. So really, when you're looking at how easily you can be hacked, it's about your risk level and what you're doing. Like you mentioned something that I found pretty funny is like, I got this email that said, you know, send me money because you were hacked and I'm watching you, da 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 da. Right? That was a social engineering phish. That wasn't you being hacked. For example, you being hacked would be Bitcoin miner installed on your system, malware being installed on your platform, where they actually stole your credentials, logged into your bank, and actually stole money from you. Those are the kinds of things that you really want to be worried about. And some people have had it happen, but a lot of people, they get ransomware, which is one version of a hack, and then, you know, I've encrypted all the files on your workstation, so now you must pay me money if you want to get them back, right? And that was popular when the ransomware first started coming out. It was getting individuals, but the money didn't pay in that because you guys would just wipe your system, rebuild it from scratch. You had backups, or you didn't have backups and you unfortunately lost all those nice family pictures. But you would either pay the ransom or not, and then be back to where you were before. But they weren't making any real money out of it. It was onesie twosies, getting quite a few people, but just onesie twosies. When they started doing it to businesses, that's when they started raking in the cash. And so they moved off of attacking you in a way. And this is where the fun begins, right? The object of you being hacked is to not, at least by the more advanced actors, is not to let you know that you've been hacked. It's to basically get under your radar, get into the platform, and then pivot to whatever thing they want of interest. For me to get hacked, they want inside my corporate business. They don't want inside my laptop. They could care less probably about me, but they want to use me as a pivot to get into my product or get into maybe find, you know, my boss or my boss's boss and move through the environment as quickly as they can. Maybe if I had admin credentials, which I don't, thankfully so, maybe use those credentials to get in. So when you start looking at what you're being hacked, it's really what are they targeting and what are they going after? Things like don't Google anything because they're tracking you. Well, cookies are tracking you all the time, but cookies aren't bad, right? For me, cookies are awesome, right? Eat them all the time, leave them on a plate. I will eat them all, right? Because I'm okay with that, right? That's what a big, nice round belly is for, is to go after those cookies. But the reality is cookies aren't malicious. Cookies are just trackers from that perspective. So when you start looking at what you need to risk or how you want to protect yourself, is you want to do things like saving your passwords in a store, not in your browser, right? And some operating systems are a little bit better of doing it in your browser, but because Microsoft is such a big target, I wouldn't use that. I'd use something like first password or 1Password or LastPass to actually store my passwords and inside the Chrome browser so that I have to ask for a password to get to the passwords from that perspective. That way you're kind of pulling another layer away from them. Because if you go click on a link and you give them and say Chrome has an update, has a flaw, or let's say Internet Explorer has a flaw, and you get into that website and they get into your system, they can use your access to get to your passwords and then pull all those nice banking stored passwords out. And then because they've seen all the links that you have, the passwords that are associated to it, they can go log into your banking account and go, well, I'm going to see if I can get $25. I got $25. Cool. Let me see if I can get $500. Cool. I got $500. And like me at the Bahamas, I'm going to go buy a laptop for $2,500 and send that off and see what I get. Naturally, this is all this protection. Fraud is your biggest winner, and your bank should do a really good job of catching that fraud when you're in one place and this purchase is happening in somewhere else. So you're looking for that help from them, and they are too, because you have protection. Even on your debit cards, Dave Ramsey and others talk about it, right? You have protection on your debit card, you have protection on your credit cards. That'll help you recover that. It sucks because you're out, like I think we were out like over the Christmas holidays, we were out about $1,200 because somebody had decided to borrow my wife's debit card and buy a couple of things from Apple and a couple of other places. But it took them about a week or so. They did the investigation and they returned all of our money back to us. But you're out the inconvenience, but people who maybe don't do good at their finances, that could be devastating to them. So what we want to do is make sure that we store those pieces as much as we can.
So Lisa covered a little bit about cameras on your computers and stuff, and she talked about hackers, but there's just a definition. What is malware? And I know we'll get into cookies later, but like, what is phishing really? I mean, give us some just simple terminologies that your everyday Joe should be able to, understand, or, Joette.
No, come down a few levels or up a few levels, whichever way you want to look at it. So let me help you be a little bit better in cybersecurity. First, it's not malware. It's not where you go shopping. It's malware, like malicious.
Malware. Got it.
Yes, malware. So and it's not anything, but I thought, yes, because the bad guys are shopping for you, really, is what they're doing. So it might be a good play. But malware is not necessarily good or bad. It's the intent of the software that you install and why you have that, right? So the adversary could, for example, you could install an app that says, hey, I'm going to help you find your searches faster. And what it's doing is grabbing all your keystrokes and storing them, and then using those keystrokes to quickly look up things that you've looked up before. Does that sound familiar? Well, that would be Google, by the way. Every time you type a key in the search bar, Google is taking one letter at a time and sending it. And that little menu that comes down that says all the things that you searched before, it's keeping track of every key that you talk. Now, is Google malware? No, it's not. It's there. It's a convenience. The malware part of it is, did I keep your password, right? Did I store, as you are transiting through me to go to your banking account, I stole your password along the way and took it from you, right? Those are, when you start talking about malware, it's code that has an intent. The intent is not to be nice to you. For example, there's a recent hack that happened a couple of days ago in Florida with respects to a water treatment facility, and they were using a piece of malware called TeamViewer, how everybody calls it malware. TeamViewer is a legitimate application. They had to get credentials. They phished somebody to get credentials. I'll talk about phishing, but they phished somebody to get the credentials. Then they just logged into the TeamViewer like you would if you were trying to help somebody. and then started to control the mouse and the keyboard and do what they wanted, and added more, I think it was sodium nitrate, so that they could poison the water and naturally the safety systems that most treatment facilities have in. But the gentleman sitting at the computer was watching his mouse move around all on its own, turning on all these things, and he's calling, it's hilarious. He's calling his buddy, help, help, it's, my mouse is moving. I don't know how it's happening, right? So the reality is that malware is intention. It's all focused on what are you trying to do with that? And are you doing it sleight of hand, or are you trying to open a back door so I can come back later? Those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. Keyloggers is a common malware. The other part is spreading, right? Most of us have had that email that we got, and oops, we clicked on it, and now it sends a message to all of our friends going, hey, click on this link. I like you too. There was this one called what we called the Melissa I love you virus, which is basically an email virus that you would get. You would click on it, it would open, and it would go all your contacts and send it to all your contacts. Different types of malware do different things. So depending on what they're trying to accomplish with it, ransomware is a version of malware, but there's different stages. Usually what we have is what's called a dropper, which is that's the initial access. I get something that drops onto your system, and then I can go fetch more malware as I need. And then the last, or the more dangerous part is what we call a RAT, a root access Trojan. And basically that gives us access to the entire system to do whatever we want from that perspective. But all of this leads to the first thing, phishing. Social engineering is 95% or more of all the attacks that come across. Getting you, Lisa, to click on that link that says you're being monitored is all I needed from that perspective, all I needed. So if I get you to click on that link, I can install malware. If I can install malware, I can infect you.
So don't click on that link, right? Hey, I want to talk about social media real quick, because I did get hacked on Instagram, or at least what they did is they did another account with my image. That's what it was. And so they were asking people for money and stuff. And so that was bad. But so there's a lot of talk also about social media platforms like Facebook giving our personal information away. So what information is being shared if that's the case? And is it something we really need to worry about?
First, they aren't giving your information away, you're giving it to them. So when you take on a social media app, what's the monetary system that supports it? It's the ads, right?
Right.
Who do the ads go to? They go to you, your friends, and everybody else around you, your social groups, all that. So when you start first trying to blame them, they're trying to give you a free service per se, right? If you remember Facebook in the early days, they were trying to give you a free service. It was all about being with your family and sharing with your family. That was the hook, right? You get to share that piece, tie that in, and then pull that together with everything that you had. So are they sharing your information? Absolutely. They have tons of information, shared apps. Like one of the things that Apple's trying to do is minimize the amount of other apps that Facebook gets. That's why they're having a huge fight with Apple right now. But sharing that information is actually supposed to help your user experience, right, with other entities that they share their information with, and help you have a better experience, or to get you to come back and click. You ever notice why you visit a website and then a couple of days later, or a couple of hours later, maybe a couple of minutes later, hey, come back to our website, we miss you. Those are those cookies coming back and them keeping track of you visiting them. Same thing happens with Facebook. You get those nice enticing, hey, Lynnette just sent you a new, or just posted a new picture. Why don't you come visit this? They're all enticing you to come back so they can get that ad revenue and share information and help you grow their brand from that perspective.
Well, Rob, we have way more questions than we have time, but as we've stayed personal, I want to stay personal when it comes to viruses. How can we protect our personal items, our cell phones, our laptops, and just from a family perspective, just those in our homes? I know that you work with big businesses and in your military career as well, you've also dealt with country securities. Just bring it down into our four walls. What can consumers like you and me well, maybe not you, but me, put on our iPads, cell phones, laptops, desktops? What can we do to protect ourselves?
So the first thing, cellular phones are pretty good about containerizing the content that's within them, right? From that perspective and what they can and can't share. So that's a good plus. That's why phones are probably more secure than your laptop and with that respect. The key with a phone though is it's more about the information around you and what you interact with. So from that perspective, I would personally make sure I understand, Lisa, which apps I have and what they collect and what they do. There's this little thing called the End User License Agreement, or ULA for short. Nobody ever reads it. It's about 400 pages long and nobody ever reads it, but it's the information that's being taken from you from that perspective. So the other side of being protective is monitoring the things that you care about. Keeping an eye on your bank account, right? If that's important to you and it's something you want to know when a transaction occurs, right? And you want to protect that. And knowing where things come from. Don't click on anything that you don't recognize. If Lynnette sends me a link, the first thing I do is hover over the link to see the URL. And if it even looks fishy, doesn't look like human language, thanks sis, delete. I'm not even remotely clicking on it. I'm just moving on. It may be a funny link to a new cool joke, but thanks very much. I'm not there.
Well, thanks, brother. I know to make sure to give you a heads up when I'm sending you something, but also thank you so much for sharing just a small tidbit of your expertise on Pop Talk. It's a real scary world and we need to be careful. And it's nice to know that our cell phones and some of these big companies are actually trying to do that as well. But because of what you do for a living, I'm not going to give you a personal website, but if you want to follow my brother on Twitter, he has a lot of information on there and he is quite hilarious. You can do that at I'll just do it. Twitter at SOCOLOGIZE. And that's Rob Gresham.
All right.
Thank you. That's so psychologize.
Thanks, Rob, for this informational interview. And we are going to give out our information, so don't do anything bad with it. If you want to connect with us, email us at info@pearlsofpromiseministries.com. We're on Facebook. We're also on Twitter at Pop Talk Media and Instagram at Pop Ministries. Thanks to our sponsor today, GracePoint Media. For all your media production needs, you can go to gracepoint.media. So that is Pop Talk today. We're just ordinary girls
who God is turning into pearls.
We'll be back next week. Okay, that is the end of the formal show. Great job.
Yes, but as you know, Rob, we skipped a lot of questions.
Yes, we're going to talk to you about some of them.
So Lisa, why don't you start with your cookie question? Because while he loves eating cookies, I'm not even sure I know what cookies are. They say accept or decline, and
yeah,
you know.
These cookies, I'm telling you, it seems like I can't go to a website, Rob, by the way, everyone, this is like an additional bonus time that we're going to give you with Rob. Like Lynnette said, we didn't get to everything. And so this is our chance to get to some of these questions that we didn't get to ask him. So we're going to stick around for about 15 minutes uncut. But every time I go on a website, it says, you must accept our cookies. This website has cookies. Well, what that is like if it's a clothing website or something, all of a sudden, every time I open up Facebook, here's what I was looking at, this, this outfit or this purse or these shoes or whatever. And I don't know how to get rid of it. So can you go to a website? I guess you can't, you don't have to accept their cookies, but if they demand it in order to watch it. And the other question on this is it best to clear out our cookies, the cookies that we accept periodically, just get them off our computer. Just talk about cookies, if you would, not the chocolate chip kind.
And not the ones that Jen made.
Okay, well, I could totally agree with the fact that you'd want to clear all the cookies out every once in a while, but that's going to make you fat. I'm just telling you right now. So try to leave the cookies in the cabinet. Cookies are little data objects. They're not malicious. They're basically, they do a lot of good things. Here's a good example of good things. If you have a particular website that you like a certain way and you set up these different settings, cookies maintain that consistency from every time you visit from that perspective. So cookies are there to be helpful, right? But they also have another use. And that other use is to be informative to the person who's running that website, to provide information for them so that they can use it for their purposes, right? And that's the other part that you have. Clearing out your cookies doesn't save you from being ad focused, for lack of a better way to put it. All it does is just make them collect more, because you're gonna have a profile. You're gonna have what I would call a digital profile. And in that digital profile, it takes in account your IP address, where you came from. And if you ever notice that, Lynnette, when you come and visit here, your viewing pleasure changes from when you're back at home, because it doesn't know where you're from, and your digital profile just changed. Because they're not saving your identity, they're saving the things that you look at and the device that you looked from, right? And some are a little bit more aggressive than others. Like, for example, Facebook's way more aggressive in collection of those other artifacts than, say, cookies are. Cookies, the reason you're getting all these accept notices, let me just back up one little second. The reason you're getting all these accept notices is there's this little thing called privacy, and we fought for it, and we basically now made it a requirement for sites to tell you that they're collecting information about you. Now, they're not so-called collecting. They're storing that information locally, and you transmit it to them when you ask for services. So it's not like they're keeping a copy of it. You have control of the cookie. And you can clear them out on a regular basis. Have you ever noticed this thing called incognito mode, and like in Chrome browser? Incognito mode basically says, you don't have to store a cookie. I won't store a cookie. You can't have my information, so that you silently move around. And as long as those sites allow you to do that, that's fine. But if there's a site that says, nope, need a cookie, I'm a pay for service, I need to leave something there, then they're going to get blocked normally by the browser by not allowing that write capability from that standpoint. Are they bad? It depends on it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And if you want ease of use and functionality, then they're probably not a big problem. But if you're worried about your digital footprint, dun, 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 then you're going to be worried about everything that's going on, and how I could scarily go Google yourself and be feared on what you find in Google across the board. Me and Lynnette have some videos out there when we were high schoolers, right, of dancing on American Bandstand, and it's out there for everybody to view, and it's not ours.
Thanks for sharing it with our audience. I really appreciate that.
Hopefully some good person will go find that and share that with you, Lynnette.
Well, Rob, you did mention about fighting for our freedoms, and you know, I just am always so proud of you and the years that you served our country in the military. With a brilliant background, but you also developed an amazing skill while you were in there, and that is the cybersecurity. And but you know something about the influence of other countries and their technology. You've seen some things. I have a shirt that says, you know, the NSA, and I get to, you know, share with everybody that my brother was part of the NSA. And but do we have to worry about attacks from enemies as the United States? We're hearing a lot about China. We hear about Russia. We won't go into politics at all, but just the normal business every day. What can you share with us? How scared as an overall country should we be?
You should be scared. In the grand scheme of things, you really should be not paranoid, but worried. There are a lot of people trying to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? That direct attacks are normally easier to thwart, but the problem with cyberspace is you don't know where they're coming from. You don't know. They have the freedom of time and preparation, right? And just like that attack on the water treatment plant in Florida, right? It could be a nation state actor. We don't know. It could be a kid from Canada that's 12 years old learning how to hack and got their password and was playing around. Maybe not necessarily true for that particular scenario, but it definitely makes people scared, because the large net or the the size of the organization generally dictates the level of security that they have. And say a small treatment facility works for a local government, the local government isn't funded very well because their state has other priorities. And so now they have to raise taxes to cover the cybersecurity cost to protect that particular piece of equipment. Now, everybody, just think of it this way, everybody in every state is now freaking out, right? Because now every water treatment plant can be attacked. That's true to a point, right? But there's a lot of little things that need to happen in order for that to occur. And there's a lot of people that are trying to make sure that that doesn't happen. There are things in like social media, we've talked about it a couple of times, Lynnette, that kind of add to that problem. Influencing people through whatever means, right, is something that has been very good for certain organizations to do over time. For me, like, I'm not overly paranoid about my public information being out there. Why? Because in 2011 and 2015, South Carolina government was hacked twice, back to back. And then just before that, the Office of Personnel Management was hacked and took all my information with that too, which is literally almost 20 plus years of data where there's a form that I put in where I lived, how long I lived there, all my information, because that's what I used to get a security clearance from. But they took all of that data and it was attributed to China, right? So even though all that data has been gone, I haven't seen an enormous uptick, right, of attacks against me per se. But that doesn't mean I'm not a target. It just means that I'm vigilant about the things that I protect, and I go after and I try to protect those particular pieces. And I rely on our folks, right, that are doing the job of protecting us. Like this year, the CISA did an excellent job of not only CISA is the Center for Information Sharing and Advisory for the US government, CISA. And they did an excellent job of telling people what they were doing and when things were fraudulent or when things were up and up, and informing the public of when something's happening that they need to protect themselves from that perspective. So even though we may think poorly of the government owning and managing some stuff, they do have, in this particular space, they have more information than we have, because they're doing it just as much as we're getting it done to us.
Right. You talked about the water plant that got hacked. There's been a lot of concern about electrical grids, and that's how maybe somebody could take out our country. But I was talking to my husband about this. He goes, there's no way that they could take out every electrical grid in the entire US. I mean, right? I mean, you tell us. They can't do that necessarily. It'd be one at a time, wouldn't it?
They can't do it one at a time. They could do a concerted effort, and they could, because there's a process called load shedding. So if you're familiar, I'll try to high level it. In electrical circuits, electricity is generated. When it's generated, it has to go somewhere. Well, where do you put it? Well, you share it. You run it around the circuit. In your house, there's constantly electricity coming in the house. So where does it go when it doesn't reach an endpoint? Well, it circles back through the system. So in electrical systems, they have load sharing agreements in regions. Like Dominion is one on the East Coast that has a load sharing with the Northeast. So the Northeast region, New York and whatnot, shares with the middle region, and the Southern region shares with the middle region. So in order to take out the whole Eastern seaboard, they would have to hit all three regions at the exact same time, right? And then there would have to be a load sharing. What they could cause is a brownout where the load would go higher, but they would have to hit all three at the same time and attack them from that perspective. That would be possible, but unlikely. There's a lot of things that go in to protect that. And there's a lot of friends of mine, really good close friends, that are spending an enormous amount of energy and their own personal time and businesses protecting those organizations to make sure that that doesn't happen. In 2011 and I can probably share this, in 2011 through 2016, I spent an enormous amount of time working with the federal government in my own state, taking SCANA electrical and taking them to exercises and practicing what would happen if an adversary did X and Y. And one of the number one things that we needed to do is ensure the security of the actual grid. because they're going to use whatever way they can get in to get in. And then how do we control that? And then what I learned is that while there is a way to manipulate the physical or manipulate the electronic system, there's also a backup physical system. And once, if necessary, they can sever the backup, or they can sever the electrical system or the electronic system to the backup system and force the backup system to run everything. So there's a good safety precaution in that process, but not necessarily risky. Could they do an individual grid and knock out a grid? Sure. But then that load sharing agreement, like say Scana Energy is my local provider, but Dominion Energy is the regional provider. If Scana gets hit and one of their substations goes down, or it affects their power generation capability at a nuclear plant or a water or a hydroelectric plant, then the load sharing agreement would be is that the load from Dominion would get transferred over to us, and then we would still be powered up from that perspective. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, but it still is spinning in my head. Because aside from your military career, you also work for companies, specific companies. You work for Splunk, but they actually help other companies concerning their cybersecurity. You have traveled around our country and other countries dealing with big companies, small companies, medical companies, some companies, most companies, you don't even tell me which companies you work for. So what are some of the biggest concerns that big companies have? You know, banks, medical, and everybody in between. Why do they come to you for cybersecurity?
First, they want visibility. You can't protect yourself from something you can't see. So first is visibility. Second piece is everybody wants to stop the fish, right? Nobody wants to be phished. Nobody likes spam emails, right? But every time we put in a mechanism, they find a way around it from that perspective. So when you start looking at the bigger problem that they have is fraud. If for financial institutions, it's all about the fraud, right? That hack that happened to my wife's credit card while we were in the Bahamas is a perfect example of fraud. Somebody paid $1,200. It wasn't me, but somebody paid it. The bank took a insurance policy, and now that insurance policy is paying for it. They're going to want to know about when fraud is happening. So that may be one, right? Ransomware is another huge one, because ransomware is really bad in the sense of if it gets one system, say our sister Mary, she does medical billing, and she gets malware in her environment and she VPNs into a doctor's office. And that malware runs on her box and now infects the other box, right? Another system that she's connecting to. That could cause an issue on the other side and forcibly cause that office to go down because they now got ransomware all over their environment and disabling them. I responded to a hospital event in California that's they can go look it up on the news in Hollywood, California, where a hospital had ransomware, 900 systems compromised in less than 3 hours. And it took us a week and a half to reverse it and put it back to normal. And they had to pay several $100,000, not only in Bitcoin to get their keys, but also in resources to validate whether or not, probably millions of dollars, to get their information back. Equifax was hacked by one vulnerability. And that one vulnerability lost the CIO their job, lost the computer information security officer his job, the individual that wouldn't authorize, they probably lost their job. And Equifax figures it was about $33 million they lost in revenue based just alone on their reputation hit for that hack and the information that was lost. So when you start looking at it from a business, it's anything that impacts their revenue. If it could be reputational data loss, like Sony Pictures, if you lose infrastructure, then it's going to be a problem because now you have to put all that back and put it into place.
Well, this has all been so fascinating. I promise this is going to be our last extra question. I mean, I think this is the longest we've ever gone after the show because it's all so interesting to us. But I just want to talk one last question about your criminal investigations that you've worked on. When they come to you, Rob, what do they do? What do they ask you to do when they're trying to solve a criminal situation?
So most of the time in a criminal situation, we'll have an asset that we need to forensically look at. And I'll leave it as this. I don't talk about the criminal investigations at all, not simply because past and future, but the reality is that we can give away techniques that we actually use. Like I talked about earlier, you're using your phone and you decide to rob a bank and you have your phone on. And all they need to do is figure out where are all the phones in that region and which one left the area around the time of the attack and how fast did it leave, right? You could just triangulate that process because you could see how fast that phone's moving from tower to tower to tower. That would be one unique way of trying to trigger that. Or if you committed a burglary and you dropped your phone and you left, right? That phone, so sad for you, burglar man, because now all I got to do is give that to the police officer. He's going to give it to me. I'm going to plug it in and I'm going to pull all the stuff off. Let's take even one more funny one. To me, it's funny. There's a certain laptop that is associated to a political figure that everybody's up in arms that the FBI has, right? The funny part about that particular laptop is if it actually was owned to that individual and that could be proven, they'd already arrested him. Because forensically, it only takes me about 4 hours to pull that apart and be able to determine whether or not that belonged to that person or not. Because the association of everything that's in there would point in that direction from that perspective. So maybe there's an ongoing, and I'm being subjective, maybe there's an ongoing investigation and the FBI is just collecting all their things. Could be possible. But the other side of it is it's probably fraud and it's probably been placed or planted in that sense with authentic looking criminal material, but not anything of real value because everything that you do is recorded. You want to go delete something out of your mailbox? I recorded it. You want to delete something off your desktop? I recorded it. You want to go delete files that I deleted that you deleted? I can delete those and I still have a record of them. You want to execute something on that system and then delete it. Bad guys do that all the time. Got a record of it. Thank you. There's so many things in the system. There's no way you could walk in the system and not be recorded in any way, shape, or means. The trick is finding you to step over that tripwire, giving me one little piece of evidence that I can start to pull. And then from that piece of evidence, I can tripwire all the way around. It's not a matter of, and when we do a forensic investigation, this is why this is not frequent. When we do a forensic investigation, it is pull all the threads. Every thread that we can find, anything, and then we start grouping them together and trying to get an idea of what this system has been doing over this period of time. So the ones that that make me the most uncomfortable and that are definitely ones that I defer on generally on a regular basis are child pornography cases. When we find something that somebody took a picture of something or they have stuff on their laptops that's inappropriate for whatever reason, it's like, okay, this is going to the FBI because if I touch it, every time I touch something in that system, I affect the data that's there. And you want to be able to positively prove how that data got on there. I'll give you another good example. This one wasn't criminal, but it was an HR investigation. I was working for a hospital in the city. Take whatever city you want. In the city, and in that city, I found an alert. Somebody had dropped a Trojan called Poison Ivy on a particular workstation. So we went and pulled it back. Pulled a forensic inventory of that system, how it got there. We actually know that he VPN'd in on the system at 12 o'clock. By 1 o'clock, he had dropped the file. He didn't execute the file. He moved it around in different folders, and then he logged off the VPN by 2 a.m. in the morning. So we're like, this isn't right. He didn't execute it, which was odd, because if it was a bad guy, he would have executed it. So we brought the person in that owned it and talked to him, and he completely denied that ever happened. And we asked him, were you working last night? Yeah, I was working last night. When did you log in? Oh, I was on from about 11 or so till about 1 in the morning. I was doing some work. Oh, you were doing some work. Okay. So if I showed you that you dropped that file and you put it on the system, is there anything that you would want to talk about? And he literally was just completely appalled that I could tell him everything that he did step by step through that process. And that's literally when we're doing something like that. Now HR reprimanded him accordingly, and you're not supposed to have malware, and you definitely don't bring it into our environment and drop it on a workstation, even if you're curious, right? You go wreck your own home machine if you're crazy from that perspective. But those are the kinds of things that a forensic investigation kind of supports, and how we use those capabilities, right? And there's definitely been cases where malware has been placed on the system, right? And forensics can help you. Malware has been placed on the system, child pornography relay has been laid there, and all their content has been stored there so that it's a relay, so that they can malicious people can go grab that information whenever they want to see it because they're trying to hide it, right? And they put that on a location. That would be one way to be able to store that information, but you wouldn't know you had it, but it's there. And if you got caught with it, what would be the first step? The first step would be you're liable for that information on your computer, one, and two, now we have to prove that you didn't put it there, right? And where's the burden of proof when you're supposedly innocent before you're guilty? The burden of proof is not only on them to prove it you, but also to prove your innocence. So that's where you and the law run into one another at that point in time, right? Because they could say,
I know
well,
what my first word would be. My first would be, Rob, can you help me? So we could go on forever, but I know that you have another call as well, but I don't know how bad Big Brother is, but my Big Brother is pretty amazing. And just the amount of information that you have to not only protect our family and those that you care about, but also our country and the companies that you work for. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for coming on Pop Talk with us. So.
Yes, thank you so much, Rob. I've really appreciated this. And like I said, we've gone longer with the post show than we ever have because it's just so fascinating. I think you're going to help so many people. So we just appreciate your time so much. And you are really, really smart. I just want to say that. Boy, I've just learned so much. I just
scared the heck out of a bunch of people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
We're going to stop the recording now.